I'm the consumer tech lead at LovePop, and tonight we're going to be talking about reactive enhancement because I needed a fun title for a blog post. So basically, we're going to talk about three main topics here. So one is who is LovePop, and the main reason we're talking about who LovePop is because we want to talk about like why are we actually building software, and the main thing about why is kind of how do we think about product development, specifically at LovePop. And the difference on LovePop and a lot of other stuff around Boston is that LovePop is a consumer technology company, and mostly specifically a consumer goods company. So we actually make and sell these fun 3D pop-up cards. And one might not think that this is that huge of a business, but I assure you it is. So really what we've been looking at, we've really been thinking about, we'll get into more of this, but as we think about the consumer space, we are not fundamentally selling our software. The software group is actually a cost center to the business. So how we think about developing and deploying software is really core to how we actually build and grow as a company. So I wanted to kind of talk through that piece. And then the what piece of this is actually what you're all here for is the how React fits into that model and kind of what we built. But that kind of makes more sense as you understand why we built it. So we'll start with the who side of this. So LovePop is we are a consumer company. Like I said, we build these really awesome 3D pop-up cards. We have 350 SKUs, and we come out with like 2 to 3 new ones a week, so targeting 100 new ones this year. And they range all over from occasion-based to just goofy characters to some more interesting licensed products that just came out. And we kind of have a ton of different pieces that we're working on. Really strong design staff. The cards are all laser cut but hand assembled, and they're all engineered to fold flat. So basically what this means is like they do exactly what they show in this picture. So they're all, so we use technology to do all the laser cutting. Our co-founders are both naval architects, and they were actually on just a trip in Vietnam and discovered this really awesome art form called slice form kirigami. And they said, this is really cool. We can use all the same tools we use to design and build ships, which are all kind of layer-based slicing and assemblage, to actually design and build these things, which are about as far away from naval battleships as you could get. And so they decided, they brought it back home to the US, started making them for their friends and family, and it actually took off like crazy. So we currently have 5 business units. So we have a retail group, which is kind of how everything started, is just pop-up kiosks. You'll see these. There's 2 here in the Peru. There's one there's one in South Station. There's one in Faneuil Hall. There's one at the MGH T-Stop. There's one in the Natick Mall. I think we have 20 between here and Manhattan. We also have a wholesale group, so we work with tons of wholesale mom and pop shops across the country. And then the group that we're mostly here to talk about is the consumer and e-com business, which is just selling the cards online. Also, over the last year, we've built out a custom wedding invitations platform, so using the technology to do really cool custom versions of these cards for wedding invitations. And then we also just started working on a custom corporate version, so being able to target real estate agents for saying thank you for having bought a house with me, or selling 100 into a business to say they want to send them out as birthday cards to all their employees. So more targeted at that, personalizing messages inside those cards. And so kind of our top line mission is really to create 1 billion magical moments. And so we are on our way there. We've got a little bit to go, but that's kind of who we are at our core. So really kind of why tech, why are we investing in this? So this is kind of like over the last 4 to 5 years, we've actually been 3x year over year growing, at least 3x year over year growth on revenue. And so this has been completely off of Shopify. This has been with almost no tech investment whatsoever. This is just using a CMS platform to be able to do all that stuff, and then putting any investment we've had into Facebook marketing. So what we realized was that 80+% of this revenue is coming directly from the e-commerce side of the business, and so we really wanted to invest in building that group. And letting that become a profit center for the org, so we can like invest into other interesting stuff potentially beyond paper cards or new business lines. So really the consumer technology group is responsible fundamentally for all digital direct to consumer sales channels. So right now that's basically our e-com experience, both on desktop and mobile. Longer term, we're looking at building out an app by the end of the year. And then we're also looking at doing point of sale integration. So like this team would also own that stuff. So looking at how do we do online, offline understanding of who are our users. Are they buying in the stores? Are they coming to our site? So as we started to scale, we kind of ran into the wall of that is Facebook. So it's kind of a marketing theory 101 here. So from a purely digital marketing standpoint, your cost per acquisition increases over time. And the reason for that is as you start to grow the business, you're trying to reach these larger and larger pockets of customers. But the reality is that there's a bunch of other people that are out there competing for those same users. And so everyone has real-time bidding platforms to try to get these people. So the larger you look for that reach, the more people you're competing against. So fundamentally, the cost to acquire that user goes up. So once you hit some inflection points on scale here, really we have to look at like how can we actually scale beyond this. So really what we need to look at is if our primary number is cost per acquisition, we have to look at what is the lifetime value of that user that we're acquiring. And so to be able to make the cost per acquisition work, we have to, if the cost per acquisition is going to go up over time naturally, we can't control that, then we have to figure out ways to increase the lifetime value. So the three primary drivers for that are average order value, general repeat rate, so make them buy more stuff on each visit, make them visit more often, and generally conversion rate. So for every $1 we spend to get someone on the site, increasing the likelihood that they actually do buy something, right? So when we looked at like how do we scale this from a technical perspective, we kind of took a step back to say, well, what is different about a consumer and e-com business than a traditional SaaS model, which is where a lot of people, especially in the Boston space, come from. So in the SaaS model, we're really talking about selling digital enablement, right? We are selling the software that we write fundamentally. And what this means is like we are enabling customers to do something they otherwise couldn't, right? So if it's a massive ad tech platform, we're enabling customers to be able to manage 30 different campaigns across 15 different social media platforms that can rotate in and out content without having to sitting there clicking the buttons and all these things, right? We're also enabling customers to do their job better, right? We're selling spreadsheeting software to be able to like manage a lot of different pieces. We're selling technology to be able to manage your business at a fundamental level. Or we're enabling domain knowledge access. So people that are working in the natural language space or the machine learning space or AI space, these are things that we want to enable that domain knowledge for people as a service because not everyone can afford a full staff of natural language developers, but they do want to take they want to be able to leverage that across their space. And then when we look at the customer base from a SaaS model, you really generally have a few customers, and the relationship with those customers is largely professional, right? It's a one-to-one of the brand to the customer. As you're building those technology, you think about, I have Staples as a customer, so we need to do X for Staples. I have Walmart as a customer, so we need to do X for Walmart, right? These customers are big, they have big pockets, and you go out of your way to make sure that they're happy, because if they leave, it's usually a decent chunk of your revenue. On the e-com space, we're actually selling physical goods, but what we build is enabling technology. And the technology here is actually enabling customers to find, buy, and repeat on their terms. So investing in responsive design is necessary because you're saying the customer wants to buy your stuff however they want to buy it. If you're on a SaaS model, you can say, no, don't use us on mobile, use us on desktop, that's the preferred experience. In the e-com world, you can't, right? We're also looking at enabling the team at large to be able to manage our product portfolio. The more products we have, the more people that are going to have opinions on what the perfect angle of that product is, what the descriptions of the product are, what metadata is it tagged with, how do we understand the relationships and referrals and all that stuff. And the most important piece is enabling fulfillment, right? We actually have to ship this good to a person within a time frame that they paid for and agreed to, and especially in the greeting card space, in time for the event that they got the card for, right? Otherwise, what's the point? And then on the customer side, we've got lots of customers. And really that relationship is much more of a personal relationship, and in this case, it's more from the customer to the brand. So if you think about, you may dislike Facebook, but that is a reason that is personal to you. Somebody else may love Facebook, but that's a reason that's personal to them. And Facebook only kind of cares about that, right? At the end of the day, they care about it on aggregate if lots of people start leaving for similar reasons, but your relationship with that brand is just based on you. It's one-to-one in that direction. So we think about that too, is like, why do people keep coming back time and time again? Why do they repeat? Why do they buy these cards? So with that lens of what differentiates us as a consumer business from a SaaS business, we look at, okay, what are our next steps, right? So we kind of saw 3 logical steps to scale the business. So one was to just straight up migrate off the Shopify platform. So this would be basically building and hosting the entire thing ourselves. The second option is Shopify has a strong app ecosystem, so looking at what kind of apps exist, what kind of plugins exist, what kind of interesting features can we add that we could scale off of. So an example is this: we wanted to build a membership program, so people get a free card, the surprise card of the month or whatever, right? So we were able to find a third-party app to do that for us instead of having to build out a recurring payment gateway. And integration for that was 2 weeks instead of 2 months to build the payment gateway. And the third piece here is to just lean into the CMS, say, okay, cool, it's here to stay. Let's figure out ways to work with it. Let's figure out ways to scale on top of it, and not invest in actually rebuilding the wheel here. So I want to talk kind of through an interesting exercise here. So let's assume that we have this big deal Q3 product initiative that we need to do to hit some numbers for the end of the year, right? So we have kind of 2 primary options, right? So it's build versus buy. It's very standard, right? So if we want to assume for a minute that we're looking at a senior software engineer whose rough cost to the company is about $200K per year, including salary, benefits, pizza, beers, all that fun stuff, right? Given that, something that takes about 3 months of dev time to build is going to cost $50K straight up, right? At a 5% maintenance cost for the 3 months of stabilization, because everyone knows that the first 3 months of getting a new service out take a little bit longer than the rest of the time after that. So there's another 10 grand there. We have a 2% ongoing maintenance cost because somebody's going to ask you, why is the thing down? You got to go check the logs. Maybe you do that once a week, but it's there over the course of the year. And then, of course, putting it on the cloud, managing your own servers, you got to pay the rent. So another, call it 2 grand costs per quarter on that. So we're looking at a roughly $70K cost to company to develop this one feature that took you 3 months to build. If we wanted to buy this off the shelf, so let's assume here we're going to spend 2 weeks researching best in breed, and then 2 weeks of integration work. We've also, because this is a great enterprise tech, we're willing to pay $2,500 a month. It's a pretty high SaaS fee, but it really solves some problem for us. So clock that in around 30 grand. Tech support's free. 1% ongoing maintenance cost to actually make those calls to tech support. And so the net on that is around 48 grand cost to company. So it's a little cheaper here to actually buy it in this case, but the long term after the fact, you don't own it. You're limited by what that platform can do. So that's a question that we all make every day when we're building new services. The problem here is that this assumes that we built the right thing, right? So what if the market research didn't exist because we didn't do any, or it was wrong, right? We talked to the wrong set of customers. We thought they were repeat buyers, and we thought they were first-time buyers, but they actually were repeat buyers, and they just lied on their intake form because they wanted the $150 Starbucks gift card, right? Or someone else beats us to market, right? You spent 3 months building this thing, and 3 months is a long time in startup land. What if adding this feature actually breaks another one that you didn't have a great test suite and you forgot to test it, and your QA team was off that weekend when you shipped it? Or what if everything was great and it did everything it was supposed to do, but it actually made a whole other group of customers angry, and those customers are now completely leaving your platform. So this causes some fundamental shift in your business design, right? So let's assume that then something about this fails 3 months into the project, right? So in the build scenario, basically you still have that 3 months to build it because you can't possibly know whether it was successful or not until it's built and out. We add the additional 5 months. So this is 3 months to build it, 3 months in market. So it took you to build it, 3 additional months out there, so you have to pay that stabilization cost. You then decide to turn it off because it sucked. So you have the 2% ongoing maintenance cost is down, 1 quarter's worth of incremental costs. Still cost you 62 grand to build, right? If we bought something here, still cost that 2 weeks upfront research, 2 weeks of integration. We're only paying for 3 months of the SaaS fee. The 1% ongoing maintenance is negligible, so net here is 24K. So cool, this is a big win. But here's the real win here. The real loss at this point is the opportunity cost. Especially in the startup game, 3 months is a huge amount of time, especially in the consumer space. So losing 3 months of dev time working on the wrong thing versus 2 weeks of integration, 2 weeks of research, and then letting it run while you're working on something else, and then seeing that that then didn't work. Now what you've saved is net 2 months of opportunity cost to work on something else. And the real issue is here, because this was a Q3 initiative to hit our goals, we missed Christmas. It didn't work, and we lost a bunch of Christmas revenue, right? So you missed your Black Friday targets, you missed your Christmas targets, and now you're starting off January 1, like down 20% in net revenue, and now the board wants to know why. So really this stuff adds up. And the time here is the key piece. The net cost in the grand scheme of things is not really the important part. So okay, so with all that in mind, so we took a lens at, okay, what does our platform actually need to do, right? So it needs to be SEOable for static content. People need to be able to Google Game of Thrones cards or Game of Thrones GIFs and find Daenerys riding a dragon, right? We also need, marketing needs to be able to manage these things. We're putting out two to three new cards a month. We do not want tech anywhere near that process. We need to be building new stuff. Managing assets, descriptions, collection, tagging, recommendations, all that stuff. Obviously the shopping cart. Shopping carts are basic. They're commodity. It needs to do that. You need to manage when you come back, it's still there. It needs to manage session tokens, all that stuff. Payment gateway, of course, we don't want to deal with any of the ACH processing or have any of that stuff. Simple order history, transactional emails. You need to know when, like, that you got it, that it's coming, that's on its way, tracking, all that stuff. Third-party fulfillment integration, people will ship the card, as we said before. And then admin tools, being able to actually do, like, create discounts and coupons on the fly, do refunds when it didn't make it in time for Mother's Day or Valentine's Day because there was a storm in the Midwest which sat on top of the fulfillment center and we couldn't hit 20,000 people that wanted their cards, and it wasn't our fault, but they still think it is. Not that that happened or anything. And the ability to then edit the orders after the fact, right? So if somebody calls in and said, oh, they spelled their aunt's name wrong on this custom message they wanted to write on it, they want to change that, right? And then the ability to build these rich dynamic experiences that are as cool as the cards that we're shipping. So, okay, this is what it needs. Well, Shopify does all this stuff, right? What it doesn't do is this. This is the thing that it doesn't do. And this is the thing that as a business, we think makes us unique. And this is where we think we can differentiate above and beyond the actual product itself. So really, when it came down to decision time, the primary decision point was that our business is seasonal and timing is our most critical resource, right? We only have 6 months between Christmas. So we do Christmas to Mother's Day, then we go dark for 6 months, and then we do Christmas to Mother's Day. So we only have really 6 months a year to make these huge step function changes. So we need to make sure we're spending that on the right stuff.
No Columbus Day cards?
It turns out that not a lot of people are looking for Columbus Day. Surprising, Halloween's not really taken off that well either, even though we keep trying to make it a thing. So basically, our primary goal here is we want to invest in building core competencies and differentiators of our team and our business. The key here are both the team and the business. So we want to invest in building something if the person learning it, if it makes sense for them to learn it, right? If it makes sense for somebody to have that domain knowledge on our org. Or we need to make sure that the business as a whole, this is going to differentiate us from other people in the same market. We just want to buy everything else. So we're going to buy everything else. Cool. So that's kind of the context around how we got to where we did. So we started off looking at what do we want to do with this platform. So we know that we're building this on top of an existing Shopify instance. Shopify is pretty fast. These are all static content generation. There's not a lot of code on the page. It's a little bit of draw jQuery, but not too much. So we want to keep it fast because our customers expect that. We want to keep it flexible. We want to be able to change this thing as we need to. We want to be able to deploy pieces of it. We want to be able to test into it. We want to make it measurable. When we have hundreds of thousands of users, we need to make sure, did this thing work? If we saw an increase or a decrease in revenue, was it because feature A or feature B? Or was it just because like it was Memorial Day weekend and nobody's around Memorial Day weekend? We want to be able to release it incrementally, right? So we need to be able to find ways to make sure that we can't just sit on changes for a month and a half because, again, we only have a small window. And also, if we have a lot of people working on the team, we need to make sure they're not stepping on each other's toes and all that stuff. So we need to find ways, big bang rewrites are bad in this space. So kind of the top level architectural goals with those kind of guideposts were, on the front end, we want to retain the static content to get the CMS and SEO freebies. We want to be able to layer some sort of dynamic content on top of it. We need that content to be component-based, lightweight, and targeted. We only want to be able to overwrite some pieces of it. We don't need to rewrite every single collection page. We just want to be able to enhance that with something interesting. We want it to be able to easy to test, both A/B testing and unit testing. We also need a standalone. We also would like a standalone data tier, which is like client-side data tier. Specifically because if we're going to have lots of independent components, we need ways to manage data across them. And we would like to bootstrap that with the server state because we're already in static content generation land, so let's do it while we can. We also need clean client-side state management to be able to know if we're doing an upsell or if we're doing a five or more bulk deal. We want to know that you've got 3 in your cart, so you're not eligible for that deal yet. And then on the back end side, we want that to be service-based and really looking at how do we fill in any gaps around what Shopify does. So kind of from the high level, here's my marketing slides around what the technology architecture ends up looking like. We kind of have the LovePop.com experience with this tier called rigging, which we'll get into, which basically acts as this intermediary tier for being able to either directly access the Shopify APIs or be able to access any of our consumer platform additions, which are currently all built in Rails because Shopify's APIs are in Rails and they've got lots of gems that do a lot of the stuff for you. So let's talk first about the data tier. So the data tier, of course, is in Redux. And we're using kind of what we're calling like an isomorphic-ish Redux. And here the thing is we don't actually control what the server side is, so we can't do full isomorphic. We do have access to the templates that are going to generate them, but we can't say swap this. You're using some weird homegrown language called Liquid, which kind of looks like Jinja, if any Python guys. But we can't change that for anything else. We just have to live with it. So we're going to try to leverage ways to do that. We like Redux because it has that single store. It's standalone. It's not tied to the view. So if we ever wanted to move off of Redux or React into Vue or Glimmer or whatever comes out next week, or to go the other way if we want to keep our Vue tier and migrate off to MobX or something else. This keeps it nice and separate. And it has some clean ways for us to rehydrate that server data. So basically what we built was, this is Liquid syntax here. Basically we have these snippets. These are 2 different files that have the .liquid syntax. And the things in curly braces that's a liquid declaration. So cart and product here are actual server-side objects that are in the template. The pipe is a filter, and JSON is the filter. So basically what this does is takes a client-side, server-side object, generates JSON out of it, and generates a JavaScript script tag that just has raw JavaScript in it. But what it's doing here is we're assigning it to a kind of semi-global, we've scoped it a little bit, object. So when this code actually runs, when the page loads, yay! Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Excited when it loads. Everyone gets excited when the page loads. So when the page actually loads, this data gets bootstrapped into this root Shopify data object. So in that we have what the exact cart was at the time the page was rendered as far as the server is concerned, as well as in this product page. If they're on a product detail page, we know what the current product they're looking at is, right? Without having to go infer it by looking at some DOM ID or get it from the URL and go fetch it client side, right? So now that we have that, we want to rehydrate that into our reducer. So it's a pretty, I know everyone's looking at MobX now and all these other fun stuff. So this is just raw Redux. We're not doing anything fancy here. So basically what we're looking at is we create the initial state by just the initial state of the cart by just assigning it to the window level object of the cart. And then when we, one more, where'd that go? Well, it's attempting to highlight the next line here where it says cart equals state equals initial state. So basically when we initialize this reducer, the first pass through of the state is that initial state object that's defined right above it, which is the cart for the page. So when this everything comes up, the first time it's there is just the data that was on the cart is already there. Nobody had to go fetch it. It's just there and ready to go. So we can start using it immediately. Cool. So that's it for the U tier. That's all we had to do. Couple of versions of those. There's not that many objects in the Liquid world. So we're able to kind of get a ton of mileage off of just doing that. On the view tier, so everyone's seen this code, everyone's written this code 100 times, right? This is kind of, React teaches us to have a single root, right? So we have an ID, we render to that ID, we get our hello world in that D. What's happening under the hood, I don't know if many people know this, but when you do render, or React DOM render, it actually blows away any of the contents of that node. So if you have some complex stuff that's underneath that node, it's gone after you call React DOM render. So the problem is if we have like if we have a complex DOM that was generated by a server-side data or any sort of static content here, we need to figure out a way to like conditionally override and target different areas that we want to generate. So what we did here is that we just have two roots or end roots, right? We have two different mount sites, mount site A and mount site B, and we are able to actually create a single instance of the store and then share it across the n different React roots that we've created. So this lets us actually pretty easily target the specific spots of a page that we want to kind of enhance with this React dynamic tier on top of it. Hence the name of the talk. So, okay, cool. So like, great. But so for every little thing I do, we have to like create a whole new route. This sounds super tedious. Chris, you're insane. There's gotta be performance overheads for this. Sure, gotcha. Obligatory portals reference. So portals, the rescue. So React added portals in 16.3. Not a lot of people have had an excuse to play with them. We found a really awesome use for them here. So take that same example that we saw. Basically what we have is the line items here in the cart, as well as the kind of that quantity indicator. Let's see, one is 2, one is 1. They group to 3. And so basically those are all React components. What we want to do is to keep those two very, very interesting pieces in sync as you're adjusting these things. So this is actually basically a raw actual code from our code base. So what we've done here is we have a traditional controller component which has a container. That cart container has access to the cart object, which was rehydrated from the server state. And of course we have our cart items, which we're just iterating across those items and rendering one for each. And then what we have is this nice cart quantity portal, which was rendered using portals. So this is in that same component, in that same controller, but using the create portal mechanism down here at the bottom, we're able to actually target a totally separate chunk of the DOM that's not anywhere near this component's tree at the same time this component is rendering. So this lets us really cleanly manage all of this. So we have this one cart controller that's managing all these different pieces of the stuff about the cart wherever it needs to without having to actually like create and mount this other piece, which is super cool. And one note on create portal, it actually does not overwrite the content of the node, which is the exact opposite of what the render does. So you do have to be a little aware of that if you are using them. You need to make sure you clean it out first before you go in, because otherwise this would just say 0 and 3 next to each other, which is not great. So okay, cool. So now if we have a lot of these different pieces, some using portals, some not, what we do, we have an orchestration problem, right? So what we need is someplace to hold that store singleton. We also need the ability to easily manage what apps are mounted and kind of where are they targeting in that DOM, and what mount sites are they at. And we also want the ability to mount or unmount them dynamically based on either A/B test assignment, user behavior, like performance considerations, or something blew up in the JavaScript like execution tier because somebody checked in some bad code, and we have an error boundary that actually fires and just says actually unmount the whole damn thing. We never want to prevent a user from actually checking out. So this is where we built this tier called rigging. A lot of our APIs are named after nautical things because of our co-founders. So rigging it is. So the first tier around the rigging library is these kind of stateful apps. So each rigging app basically comes with two primary things that we're interested in. One is the component class, and one is one or more mount sites. The component class is obviously what component root are we going to mount, and mount sites are where are we going to put it. We have also, when we create one of these rigging apps, we also give it a reference to the store. So the app itself keeps a reference to the store. So then when we in the init, we're just going to for each across the mount sites. And for each mount site, it can take a DOM ID that we're mounting against as well as conditional props so that we can actually mount these things in different places with different properties. And then when we render them, we render the class, hand it the store, and the props. And so this is basically just like you were doing it in the static code in your main.js file, but in a slightly more managed way. And then, of course, if we have an initializer, we have to have a destructor. So we're using the unknown component at node. And we're also storing some state within the app for whether or not it is mounted or not. So if we want to do some querying against that. Okay, cool. So now that we have our apps, I want them to be config driven because I want to be able to add new ones really easily. So basically, we can write the controllers in their own independent spots. Then we have this one app config, or we could have more app configs if we wanted to do some bundle splitting. This would be a really clean way to do that. We haven't done that yet, but it's on my list. So here we have multiple apps underneath this config, and so they effectively initialize just with a name, and then a new rigging app which contains the properties that we mentioned before, right? So here's the component class we're passing around, and here's the mount site. What's also cool is that we can have multiple mount sites, which actually take multiple different properties. So this came in super useful for on our cart, on the static cart page, the specific spot that the DOM structure didn't really cleanly work for a responsive design. So instead, we actually had to mount two different versions of the component in two different spots, depending on one was targeted at mobile, one was targeted at desktop. And one of them we wanted to behave slightly differently. So this solved that problem really cleanly for us. We were able to just pass in the props to change that initial mount behavior for the one version of instance of that what was mounted in that specific spot. Cool. So now that we have that config, we need a managed singleton to like drive all of this, right? So this is our kind of root rigging object. This is our like root app object. And its constructor, when it gets created, it actually creates the store. And not only does it create the store, it actually scopes, or it maintains a reference to the store. It also maintains a reference to dispatch, which we'll see in a second. It, of course, comes with lifecycle events. We initialize it with that app config that we saw on the previous slide, which then does a for each across the apps and initializes each individual app and hands it a copy of the store. We also have the ability to destroy or reset some apps by name. So we have some management at the top level to be able to actually turn these things on and off as need be. And then in our kind of root.js file, we just create a new instance of it, scope it to the window. And because this is still on Shopify, jQuery is already there, so we're just using it here to when the page is ready to go, we're just initializing it with that app config. And the thing that's kind of cool here is because we stuck that on the window, we now get these really convenient accessors to be able to like event into the React and rigging tier from outside it. So not everything has to be fully ported to this tier. If you still have some specific buttons somewhere out in the world that needs to event in, the reason that's possible is because we scoped a reference to dispatch, right? So here we have a cart updated event, which has a reference to dispatch in it. So it's actually dispatching a traditional Redux action, and that just goes into the store. And because Redux and React are fun to play with together, everything that cares about the cart actually just updates, just works. And we're firing this from within a jQuery event. Like this is just somewhere else on the page that was in code that we just didn't have time to port the whole thing over, but we needed to fire an event when they click that button. And here we go, it just works. So that's kind of that's all the code we have today. So this was all came out of a blog post that we wrote. So this is kind of the summary for that. So I'm just going to read this. I was trying to paraphrase it, but I think it was good enough on its own. So like over the last decade, the web development community has gotten a lot of shiny new toys, which have come with a whole lot of complexity. Single page apps are super cool, but you occasionally have to jump through some pretty big hoops to get some of the basic essentials like SEO. So all of that takes time, which is the single most precious asset when trying to establish or grow your presence in the market. When we began this project, we evaluated a lot of options on how to bring our CMS into the modern era. And ultimately, this path outline here, we were able to get us where we wanted to faster than we thought possible. We were actually able to, the first big project we did through this, was adding a bulk upsell deal of like adding buy 5 and get them for $50. They're 13 to 15 bucks. Add a little progress bar. We did some A/B testing around whether it was there or not, what kind of messaging we wanted in that. That launched, and it was $5 million of incremental revenue for a small company at the time that was like 35 people. That's a big win. And we were able to do that without rewriting any of the Shopify code base, right? There's just layering the stuff on top of it. So by thinking critically about where and how we want to invest our time and to get our biggest bang for the buck, we've been able to move the needle meaningfully in our business while like not really overcommitting to building technology that already exists in the world. Like, who wants to rebuild another shopping cart? How many times has that been done? It's not a fun project. It's just something. It's table stakes at this point. It's commodity. And so we've been able to focus on really what makes us and what makes us us. And ultimately, that's the most important thing a startup can do. You're here for a reason because somebody else hasn't thought of that idea yet. And if you waste time building their idea, you're not building your own. So that's it. And I brought some cards with me if anybody wants some freebies afterwards.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want to do questions?
Yeah, absolutely. We got time to kill. I'm the only speaker, so.
I can take the mic around if anyone has questions.
So I was curious, were you the engineer who did that 3-month makeover of the code?
This project we went. Yeah.
Yeah, great job.
Thanks. Thanks.
So portals is kind of a new thing. Were you exploring other options without portals? I saw, you obviously have the multiple routes.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that brought you to the portals at the end?
Sorry. Yeah, so actually it was that exact example that I used. I said to myself, like, all I want to do is make this stupid number update when that thing over there changes, right? It has no state. It's not interactive. It's just a status indicator that's updating when something else changes, right? So it'd be like having a badge somewhere that says unread message count, right? It's not interactive. All it's doing is reading data, and it's being jammed into the DOM somewhere else. And for me to have to add a whole new React route, add to the page load, like it didn't make sense to try to do it that way. So we had seen that portals came out. I wanted to play with it. I thought it was an interesting option because that's exactly what it's meant for. They really pitched it a lot as like mostly for like modals. Yeah, it was their first thought. It was like modals are something that lives outside the DOM. It's effectively a secondary app root that has its own state. Like, well, why? Like it can also be within that app root. Like it doesn't matter. You're just targeting something else. It's outside that component root, which can get some really nice wins. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily want to do this if you had a full single page app because you're kind of then going around that ecosystem. But in a case where something else generated content on that page outside your actual app context, it's a really clean, really easy way.
Awesome.
Any more questions? All right, well.
Cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
It's good.